Hi, my name is Corba Montaño, and I teach English as a second language at Brigham Young University, Hawaii in Laie, Hawaii. And today I wanted to share one of my favorite activities for helping my students prepare to give presentations. I call it skill-focused presentation speed dating. And I love this activity for a variety of reasons. It is very simple to plan and execute. I also really like that it's very adaptable for your students and your course and your unique needs. I especially like that it has really helped my students to automatize key presentation skills, and it's really elevated the level of presentations that are given in my class. And I've also gotten really positive feedback from my students about the activity. They really enjoy it and feel like it has helped them to give better presentations. And we did the activity the first time in the semester, and then they kept asking to do the activity more during the semester. So let me tell you a little bit about how this activity got started. I teach a class where there are two really high stakes presentations during the semester. One is part of their midterm and one is part of their final. And as we were preparing for the midterm presentation this past semester, I gave my students a survey where I asked them what the most difficult part of preparing for their presentation or giving their presentation is for them. And almost everybody had a response that was in some way related to confidence. And that wasn't a huge surprise to me. I feel like it's fairly common knowledge that most of us don't love speaking in front of large groups of people. And so I wanted to come up with an activity that was going to really help my students improve their confidence and feel confident for their presentations. I also was thinking about what I needed from my students and what I needed them to be able to do, and the presentation skills that I needed them to master during my class so that they could, of course, do well on those presentations in my course, but also take that with them and be able to give good presentations in other classes in the university and in their jobs and other responsibilities that would require presentation skills. So as I was thinking about these two things, that's how I came up with this activity to fulfill these two purposes of helping my students boost their confidence and developing really strong presentation skills. So let me tell you a little bit more about the activity and how to do it, plan it, execute it. And then I actually have it's a little time-lapse video of my students doing the activity so you can get a visual of what it looks like. Then I'll show you the materials that I use when I'm actually walking my students through the activity in class. And then we'll talk about some tips for success with the activity, some benefits of it, and some variations that you might want to implement. So the first thing that I always do in class is give my students a prompt. So the first time that I did this, it was Valentine's Day. So I created just a fun little prompt that was actually really closely related to the prompts that they were going to have to do for their midterm, but it had a Valentine's theme applied to it. So they really enjoyed that, but it was very closely related. So the same organization pattern was going to be used as their actual presentation. The second time we did it in class, I had them actually just practice their presentation, their final presentation with it was the same prompt. So it just depends on you and how you want to do that. And I usually give them a few minutes to prepare. I don't give them a long time to prepare. Usually I tell them how to come prepared to class beforehand so that they come prepared, and then I give them just a few minutes to regroup. Then I have them stand in speed dating formation lines. So everybody should be across from one person. Then I explain kind of what's going to happen with the activity. So the purpose of this activity is to have them focus on just one presentation skill at a time. So on the board, I'll show you my slides in just a second, but on the board, I'll put the skill that I want them to focus on for that round of practice. So you'll see the first example that I have is about how you stand. So for the first time, they need to focus on how they're standing, their posture, how they're moving, making sure that they're presenting themselves in a professional way. And so during their first round of practice, that's all they focus on. They're going to present their content, but the focus is on how they're standing. So I'll tell them that the first partner is going to give their presentation I'll give them a time limit, and they're focusing on how they're standing, right? Or whichever other skill that they're focusing on, depending on the practice. And the second partner, so their partner is going to actively listen. They really need to actively listen and know that they need to be actively listening, because they're going to give feedback to the partner after they're done. So the first partner presents for the amount of time that's indicated, and the second partner then has 30 seconds. I usually give them 30 seconds, but you can adjust that based on your students' needs. They have 30 seconds to give feedback about the skill. So we're not giving them feedback about other things. We're only giving feedback about the skill that they were focusing on. So for the first example, it would be they would give feedback about how they were standing. And I tell my students that they need to give at least one thing that they did well and at least one thing that they could improve. Then we switch roles. So the second partner gives their presentation for the amount of time that we indicate, and the first partner, listens and then gives feedback. And then we rotate partners. So this is what it looks like. Let me pull up that video. So we'll just focus on the companionship that's in the front here. You'll see that he's going to start presenting and she's listening, and then you'll see her give feedback and then launch into her presentation. So you can see he's presenting here and she's listening, and now she's giving feedback and giving her presentation, and then you'll see him give feedback. And then they switch. So now he's giving his presentation, and then he'll give feedback, and now he's giving his presentation, and now he's giving feedback, and then they switched again. He's giving his presentation. All right, so as you can see, I only had 4 volunteers come in for the video. Usually I'd have a whole class of students doing that, and usually I'd have them just rotate down the line. But because we had 4, we just had everyone switch so that everyone could practice with everyone. So that's how it looks. And let me go back to my presentation. So these are the actual slides that I use. So this is the first slide that I have. It explains the prompt and gives them the time limit. So for this one, I gave them 3 minutes to prepare, and then they only had 2 minutes to present. So, and then these are the topics that I have them focus on. The first one, and you can do these in any order, but this is just the order that I have them in. I tried to plan them in a way that it would start with easier things to focus on and then progressively get a little bit more difficult or complex as far as the presentation skill goes. So the first one is focus on how you're standing. The second one is your hand motions. Third is being enthusiastic, eliminating filler words, making eye contact, having clear organization, being clear and concise, including appropriate transition words, and time management. So those are the skills that I've seen that my students really need to work on, and you might want to include others or not include some of these based on the needs of your students. Here are just some tips for success after I've done this activity a few times. The first thing is be sure to model what each skill looks like before starting the practice. So in the first example, we're practicing how we're standing. So I want to make sure that my students know exactly what that looks like, even if we've already talked about it in class. So I want to model it. I also like giving them bad examples of what it shouldn't look like. If we're practicing transitions, what transitions should we use? Where in the presentation should we use transitions, etc. So making sure that they understand and have clear examples of what they're doing before they practice it. The second thing is, depending on the size of your class, it can get really loud. So one thing that I started doing instead of trying to get my students' attention is just using the lights as a signal for transitions. So flicking the lights on and off when it's time to give feedback or to change partners, so that you are not wasting time trying to get their attention when it's very loud in the class. And then the last thing is if your students are anything like mine, they kind of shy away from giving constructive feedback sometimes. Sometimes they like to focus more on the positive that their partner has done. And one thing that I've done that has actually really improved how much constructive feedback my students give is making sure they are aware that they are required to give one piece of positive feedback that they did well and tell them at least one thing that they could improve. So that has been really helpful in making sure that my students get the kind of feedback that's really going to be helpful for them. There are many benefits to this activity. Of course, the students get lots of practice with their presentation. They also get lots of feedback from a variety of students in their class so that they can improve their presentation. Not only did they get to practice, but they get to see their classmates practice. So they see lots of examples of the presentation. They get to see what their classmates are thinking, and they can see sometimes good and sometimes maybe not so good presentations, which can help them in turn improve their own presentations. Not only do they get to see those presentations, but they get to work on their evaluative skills as they have to think about what is good and what maybe could be improved about those presentations that they're seeing. It also helps students to be a lot more comfortable when they're presenting to their classmates. We take a really high stakes situation of preparing in front or presenting in front of the class for a grade, a very important grade, and we make it into a really low stakes activity where they're just practicing with each other. And it gets them to feel a lot more comfortable with the people that they're practicing with. And hopefully that translates into a lot more confidence when they're presenting. And also, one thing that I love about this is they just focus on one skill at a time. When we're giving a presentation, we have so many things to think about. We're thinking about our content, we're thinking about how we're presenting ourselves, we're thinking about our English skills, we're thinking about our presentation skills, we're thinking about so many things. And so if we can just minimize what they have to think about and focus on really developing one skill at a time and automatizing that, it can translate into much more effective presentation skills when they are under pressure and when it is a high stakes situation. And of course, like I said, they should have improved presentation skills. All right, here are just a few variations that you might consider for your class. This is by no means all of the variations, but the number of skills that I've listed is a lot. You might not have time for all of those. So just choosing the skills that you want your students to work on. You also might have your students choose the skills that they want to work on. The last time I did this, I put all the skills up on the board and had everyone vote for the skill, the 3 or 4 skills that they felt would be most beneficial for them. And then we practiced the ones that had received the most votes. You also, instead of having the students practice different skills every time, you might want to have them practice the same skill multiple times. Also, adjusting the time limits as needed. And in my classroom, you could see that the speed dating formation was the most logical based on the setup of my classroom. But based on the layout of your classroom, concentric circles might actually be a better option for you. And you also could vary how the students give and receive feedback. You might want to have them write the feedback rather than give it verbally so that students can look back on the feedback that they've received when they're practicing outside of class. So those are just some thoughts of things that you could change to adapt this activity to meet your needs and your class's needs. So thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a great time using this activity to help your students practice their presentation skills.